Um, all right, so walk across the room is just walk across the room, very easy, right? And Andrew pointed that out, like that there are barriers that oftentimes prevent that from happening. And I think you can think about the difficulty of walking across the room and feeling like you're isolated from other people and barriers. You can track that all the way back maybe to high school. I'm guessing maybe everybody in this room might be able to think of what it was like sitting in a lunchroom, wondering if someone was going to sit by you or not. Or, and as you live through life, you find yourself oftentimes in different positions, sometimes of your own making, where you find yourself in isolation. You find yourself kind of on your own. And I've found myself in that position before too, where I've just been in a dark place. I just want somebody to ask me, "Are you okay?" Or "What can I do for you?" Or "How can I love you today?" And it can be difficult, feeling like you're by yourself, and there's lots of things kind of between you and other people. And for this reason, maybe today you've come here and you actually are in that position. You kind of feel like you're on your own or you're isolated, and I don't know what your experience has been here at Genesis already, but I've often seen the power of people just going over to somebody else, putting an arm on their shoulder, and just saying, "Hey, I'm glad you're here." I've seen that here many times. I'm going to read from Luke. And I'm just going to I decided for today, because it's Memorial Day weekend and things are kind of easy going, I wasn't going to give you a ton of slides or anything like that. I'm just going to read from the Bible and share you a story about a guy named Zacchaeus and his encounter with Jesus. And I'm hoping that he will give you a little bit of insight into how Jesus, into how God's love really not only comes in contact maybe with where you're sitting right now, but also encourages you to interact with other people in this room, and at home and everywhere else as the opportunity arises. So, all right, I'm going to read it once, and then I'm going to try and see if hopefully the tech works and I can kind of go backwards. So I'm going to read it once, and then we're going to go back through it one more time. And I think that's a healthy thing. Repetition is good. So Jesus, entered Jericho and was passing through. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich, and he was seeking to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. So Zacchaeus hurried, came down, and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled. "He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner." And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, "Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." All right. So I'm going to go back all the way to the beginning now. So I've read that account, and I said before that I think this is an important Bible passage to take a look at when you understand how God kind of approaches me where I am, and also is an incredible encouragement for me to walk across the room and to unconditionally love other people right where they are. So Jesus entered Jericho. He was passing through, and there's a man named Zacchaeus. Okay, Zacchaeus, we've already established that. And maybe you've heard the song, Zacchaeus, he was a wee little man. Yeah, we were going to sing that one. That would have been a little easier for Andrew's hand as he was playing, I suppose. But he was a chief tax collector and was rich. What I find very interesting about the Bible is in one sentence you can learn a lot about people. And you can learn, a ton can be jammed and right into a sentence like that. And from our modern ears, we look at that. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. Okay, we look around, and in our society, you see a lot of people, quite a few people that have a lot of money. And being a tax collector isn't necessarily like, you're a pariah or, you're an outcast in society. But that's very much what it was like for Zacchaeus. What we learn... I have to give you a little bit of background to help you understand. So in Zacchaeus' day, the Romans ruled this whole area. They were an empire. So they would go around, they'd conquer different areas. And when they conquered an area, They would take it over, and then they would have the people who already lived there govern, but then they would send the money, whatever they would collect, back to Rome. So the Romans needed to collect taxes, and that would go back to Rome to fund and fuel their empire, okay? So how would they collect that money? Well, they'd find people. They'd find people in that society to collect it for them. That's what the tax collectors would be. So you need to understand that, so understanding also that Zacchaeus was rich, that's a big deal, because being rich was not common in those days, okay? People just weren't rich. Okay, you had to be born into it, more or less. Okay, so the only way you could get money and be rich was sometimes by maybe, not doing things necessarily in the most, you basically had to be dirty. Okay, I'll just say it. You just had to be dirty. And Zacchaeus being a tax collector, was basically a guy that the Romans came to and said, "I want you to collect taxes from your neighbors." Okay, and what tax collectors typically would do is they'd go door to door, or they call people to come to them to receive the taxes, and they wouldn't just, they would take what the Romans would ask for. But how would they make money? They had to take more on top of it. So imagine this. So Zacchaeus would have been a guy that grew up with his people in his neighborhood, his fellow Jews, and the Romans came along and they're like, "Here, you can make a lot of money if you go tax everybody, go take money from them, and you can, take a little bit off the top while you're at it." How do you think his people around him would have felt about that? So Zacchaeus just gets to decide how much more he's going to take off the top, and he can demand it because he has a whole he has Roman soldiers behind him to back him up. And on top of this, Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector, so other tax collectors reported to him. All right? So he had all these people reporting to him. He was like a bigwig, and he had tons of money. So you could really look at Zacchaeus this way. He was like a guy living off, in some mansion in this area who nobody ever goes to visit because they hate him. Can't stand him. He has all the money, right? But he had to be absolutely miserable. You get the sense that he was lonely. He was this short man. He had to climb a tree because people wouldn't let him through. And so you find out. He was a chief tax collector. You right there, you realize he was hated, he was rich, and he made that money because he was dirty. And he was seeking to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, okay, it was a big crowd, but let's be honest, they wouldn't have let him through anyway. He could not because he was small in stature, so he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him. Now, it's kind of demeaning to climb up into a tree because you're too short and people won't let you through. But you get the feeling that Zacchaeus was a guy that was so, money was his god, it was his idol, that was the thing that mattered most to him. So, he wasn't, it didn't bother him at all. He'll climb up a tree and he'll see Jesus, he's all about money, right? So he ran ahead, climbed up a sycamore tree. Jesus was about to pass by that way. And you should understand then, so here's kind of like his community, and Zacchaeus is over here, and you have this barrier between them, and people just would not talk to him. He would have been an outcast. They would have looked at him like he was dirt under their shoe, okay? You want to know what a sinner looks like? You look at Zacchaeus. He's a sinner, okay? And when Jesus came to the place, and this is what's most amazing, and you don't, if you don't know that about Zacchaeus, that everybody hated him, and all the people would have pushed him outside saying, basically look at how much better I am than Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus is a dirtbag, If you understand all of this, you read what Jesus did, and you begin to see the power of this event, what I'm going to read here in a second. When Jesus came to the place where Zacchaeus was, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." This is like, if you want to go back to that lunchroom, you have like the one person nobody ever hangs out with in the lunchroom, and then the most popular kid at school, walks past everybody, sits by them and says, I want you to come over to my house tonight and hang out. And everyone's just like, what? That's pretty much what's going on. It's pretty much what's going on here. Jesus knows that, and understand this, Jesus knows that Zacchaeus is money-grubbing, self-centered, sinful person. He knows this. But what he understands is that Zacchaeus, more than anything, needs to be loved. And Jesus understood, he knew, and because, Jesus came to die on a cross, okay? He understood that sin can't be changed by God just saying, stop it. I suppose it's God, he could do it if he wanted to, but I mean, when does just somebody looking at you saying, stop it, or change? I mean, does that change a heart? What I've found in my own life is that grace, when somebody shows me unconditional love, suddenly I have amazing motivation to make change in my life. When I find myself at a low place and then somebody walks across the room to me and just gives me the time of day, that's when something stirs in my heart. And that's exactly what happened to Zacchaeus. Nobody would stop for him. Nobody, there was this barrier between him and other people. And Jesus approached him and said, I'm coming over to your house today. And that's a big deal. Because going over to somebody's house in that day meant that you were like in, okay? And so people saw this looking at Jesus and like, what is this guy doing? Why would he do that, So Zacchaeus is like, what's going on? No one ever does this to me. So you can imagine him he hurried down this tree. You can almost imagine like almost jumping down like, dude, he's coming to my house, okay. And he came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, the other people, what did they do? They all grumbled. He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. Remember what I said? So what is a sinner? And this is what you get in the Bible a lot of times, that people would look outwardly. What does your life look like? And so what people would do is they'd try to scrub the outside, make sure they looked really good. And Zacchaeus, on the outside, sure, he had money, but he was stealing from people. So on the outside, he's not good, so he's a sinner. And the point that Jesus made over and over and over again was that the heart is sinful. I have a disease from the inside out. So as much as I scrub the surface, I still have it. And so knowing that, Jesus could look at Zacchaeus, who was not very clean on the surface, and he could approach him and show him love. All right. He has gone to be in the guest of a man who's a sinner. And this is what I was talking about before then. And what did this do to Zacchaeus? What did this do to him? And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. So usually if it's stolen, you'd pay it back plus maybe a little bit of interest. Zacchaeus is saying, I will give away half of what I have. I mean, this is how much of an impact that Jesus had in his life. Can you imagine giving away half of your stuff? No matter how much you have, can you imagine giving away half of it? I mean, I could never imagine that. And that's exactly that's what the presence of Jesus did to Zacchaeus. And what Zacchaeus realized was, as much as he loved money, he realized that Jesus offered so much more. So much more. And Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, since he is also a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Basically, he was saying, he's also a son. He's a son of God. He's a child of God. And that's the message of Jesus. And really, so Jesus basically walked across the room. He walked across the room to Zacchaeus. Okay? I have to reset this because this is being goofy now. And how does Jesus do that to me? That's really the message of the cross. I've never done anything in my life to warrant God approaching me and saying and forgiving me and loving me. Never. Even in the best things that I've done, there's always a shadow of some probably misguided motivation. And yet what Jesus did to me, and that's the sinful nature at work, And what did Jesus do? He came to me, unlovable as I am, and he gave his life for me. Okay? He didn't just come over to my house, okay? He one-upped it. And that's later what Jesus would do for Zacchaeus as well. And so, I don't know what kind of a place you are, where you are today yourself. But this is one of the reasons why I encourage getting into the Word and studying God's Word, because when I say things like Jesus coming to me and offer me grace, offer me unconditional love, when you get into Bible study and when you get into the Word, you begin to understand how that applies. And in my own isolation, how does Jesus pull me out of that? If you ever get a chance to come to one of our Bible studies on Thursday, I encourage you to come, because it gives us a chance to dig deeper into some of this. But you see, for Zacchaeus, what he realized was money can't save me, Jesus can. You see? What are you trying? What are the things is your pride keeping you in isolation? What is it that you have between yourself and God? Well, see, Jesus comes and he approaches you and he shows you unconditional love. And maybe you're in a place today where you just need to focus on the hope that Jesus offers or the healing that he offers, and you're just setting your eyes on him and you're looking at what he has done for you. Maybe he's been at work on you for a while, and if that's the case, what I would encourage is maybe thinking about ways that you might be able to walk across the room to somebody else. Be the hands and feet. Look around this room and see, is there somebody in this room you've never met before? Is there somebody that you know of that's struggling? And maybe somebody that you could invite to come here and just join our community. Walk across the room. And don't just do it because I'm telling you to do it. Do it because Jesus did it for you. Jesus did the exact same thing for you and for me. And I tell you, that's something I need to hear every day. Because if I look inside myself for hope, healing, and growth, yikes. We're going to get into our groups in just a little bit, and for Connect. And I'm going to encourage you to honestly share about this. What are some of the things that prevent you from reaching out to other people? And I want you to think about that. In what ways do you kind of build barriers between yourself and other people? What ways do you kind of isolate yourself? And I want you to reflect on how Jesus made a living out of breaking down barriers, and he still does. That's what he does. He breaks down the barrier between me and God by dealing with that sin that would separate me from him. And he breaks down the barriers that would exist between me and other people because he reminds me that, that the reason he went to that cross was because of me. And if God would do that for me, you know what? Then why can't I walk across the room and love somebody else? Just listen to them and be present with them.